Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, your inbox has probably been clogged up in recent days with emails from companies about your personal data and their privacy policies. It's all connected to a new data protection law that comes into force across Europe tomorrow. Well, as you can see, the law, called GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, has been causing confusion, bemusement and exasperation among Twitter users. Amal Rajan looks at what's happening, why it matters and what it says about our changing times.
Look familiar? Over the past week, millions of us have been inundated with emails seeking consent for our data to be retained and used. How clear are you about what GDPR is?
I'm not at all.
GDPR? What is that?
I have no idea.
GDPR, what is that exactly?
GDPR gives consumers much more control over their data. They can now expect to be told who their data has been shared with. They can opt out of profiling, and they can challenge automated decisions about issues such as whether or not they should be offered a loan. And beyond that, consumers can now demand free access to data about them held by a company within a month. But for many businesses, even small ones like this aquatics firm near Birmingham, complying with GDPR is onerous. All firms must now appoint a data protection officer, seek explicit consent, and allow customers to delete, inspect and correct records. Many think their mailing lists are now redundant.
In today's busy society, I'm exactly the same. You get bombarded with emails, and I can quite easily see that mailing list shrinking from 3,500 down to less than 1,000, which we've then got to build back up again.
I think that message has been lost to some extent.
One leading lawyer says many of the emails sent in the past week weren't needed. Nina, a lot of individuals are being bombarded by emails. Are these emails actually necessary?
In many cases, they're not necessary. There is a rule that if you are sending unsolicited direct marketing by email or text to an individual, you do need their consent to do so. However, in many cases, individuals will have already given that consent. And also, businesses can rely on something called the soft opt-in, and that means that they can continue to send marketing messages to existing customers in respect of similar goods and services, provided they give them the opportunity to opt out.
Economic history is infinitely complex, but it does display clear patterns. The agrarian economy was based on land and the cultivation of crops. The Industrial Revolution created an economy driven by manufacturing. That in turn was followed by the growth of services and the knowledge economy, which places a premium on information. Capital today is shifting toward a new type of economy, one in which the most precious resource isn't something that we can touch, smell or hear. This is the data economy. Today, the most powerful companies in the world are those who hoard almost unimaginable quantities of data. These companies are a new kind of media and technology giant, powered by algorithms that allow them to monetize information about all of us. Demand for information caused the regulator's website to crash briefly today. It's now up and running again, and just as well. The world is watching this European attempt to take back control of our data. Amal Rajan, BBC News.
Now, I don't know about you, I'm not only getting tired of emails from organisations with whom I have no known relationship at all telling me that they're updating their privacy policy, thanks to the new GDPR European data law. I'm now even tired of people making jokes about it. Thankfully, the new rules come into effect tomorrow, so the traffic should be slowing up. However, despite all the emails, I suspect most of us are still in the dark as to what the law actually says and why some companies want you to opt into their mailing list and others not. Do those organisations understand it themselves? Who better to offer us a quick GDPR explainer than our own technology editor, David Grossman?
Celebrating compliance? Well, fingers crossed. A group of business people meet to mark this milestone in their GDPR journey with a curry. Lawyer Suzanne Dibble runs a Facebook group of 30,000 small business owners, all worried about implementing the new rules.
We're getting all of these messages in our inbox at the moment saying, will you opt in, will you opt out? There's confusion around that because people are saying, well, these people asked me to opt in, these people are asking me to opt out, who is right, you know?
And who is right?
Well, there isn't a right, that's exactly the point, there isn't a right. It all depends on how you have previously obtained consent from people, and it depends on what relationship you have with those people. So, for example, with customers, you could potentially rely on legitimate interests and you wouldn't need consent to keep emailing them. So it's a complex regulation.
GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation. Companies will have to become more responsible and answerable for how they store and process our data. They'll have to get our explicit informed consent to collect it. And as citizens, we'll have the right to access the data and have it deleted. And companies will be held more accountable if they suffer a data breach. The maximum fine is €20 million, or 4% of annual global turnover, whichever is greater. And that's a terrifying prospect for people like Alison Burrows, who runs an education data business. She doesn't have in-house lawyers to advise her.
I thought, oh, it doesn't really mean anything to us. You know, I thought it was for people who did loads and loads of data entry or something like that, or held loads and loads of documents, all the big companies. And then in the last sort of 3 months, I was thinking, oh my goodness, you know, it really does need for us to sort it out as well. We've had to update privacy notices and documentation that we've had to send out to schools to be signed, and actually get those documents back with signatures has been a challenge. And also some of the schools don't actually understand it themselves, because we're not dealing with necessarily data people, we're dealing with teachers and senior leaders in schools.
But not everyone can celebrate ahead of tomorrow's deadline. Suzanne thinks not only are many small businesses in the UK not compliant, many, she says, still don't even know they need to be.
David Grossman joining me now as IBM's Data Protection Officer, Christina Cabella. Very good evening to you. So after this Act takes effect and it's all settled down, what will I notice that is different?
Well, for sure you will notice that you will have more control on the data that you provide to companies and to the purposes for which you provide your data.
So where will I notice that? I mean, is this the end of spam? Is that what it is?
Well, spam will reduce, definitely, as a result of 2 factors mainly. The control individual, as I said, will have, and so the possibility they will have to decide if they continue to receive communication or not, for what purpose and from which companies. On the other side, companies, due to GDPR and the huge fines that were mentioned, but also the entire accountability regime and transparency that has been imposed on companies, will be interested in having a more discipline in the way they also use data of their customers.
When you say I will get more control, what do you actually mean? Is that when will we stop this silly thing where they sometimes fill in one box and don't fill in the other box, and they say if you don't want to not receive our marketing emails, don't tick the box, and then you can't remember? It's all going to be simpler? Yeah.
It's going to be simpler because the way communication about use of your data will come to you will over time be simplified, be in more basic terms. So we should over time really receive less communication, more on the point and more clear.
And can an app, so some apps they say seeks your permission to access your contacts and your photos, and you think, why does that app need any of that? Now, will they not be allowed to do that? Or not and always I say yes, because I have to say yes to get the app.
Well, it depends. It depends from the apps, and it depends what the type of service is, whether it is a free service that is dependent on your availability, basically, to give your data for the purpose of the service being provided or not. The entire point of GDPR is really to ensure that individuals are more aware of their data and what can be done with their data. And on the other side, ensuring that companies are more transparent in the way they use data. In IBM, we have always been extremely concerned about the trust that customer puts on the way we use data and our philosophy. And we are this week calling on technology companies to follow our route in a sense and to adopt principle of responsibility.
Okay, right, yeah, well, and lots of other companies I'm sure would say they try to be responsible. Is it the case that at the moment, because of this process, databases everywhere are being cleared up? I mean, I'm hoping by ignoring lots of the emails that have been sent to me, I will be removed from the databases and we'll never hear from them again. Is that what's going on, though? Are lots of people?
Well, for sure, many of the notices that you are receiving are coming from companies that you didn't even realize that had your data. And that's part of the problem. So there will be a cleaning to be made by companies in terms of what data they have and whether they have the permission of using them. The fact that there is this massive communication is also a signal of the panic kind of mood of the moment, where companies tend to over-communicate, sometimes because they don't control the purpose for which the data were retained in the company. And that's
but I feel a bit sorry for some smaller companies like the ones we saw in David's film.
This is a big concern.
I mean, they're these companies, no one feels sorry for Facebook, do they, or Cambridge Analytica, but for some small company, the data is really, really important.
And I believe this is one of the concerns. Small and medium businesses may find extremely complicated to afford the complexity of the regulation. For example, in IBM, we have now developed in Europe a nice solution for ONG.
Okay.
Sorry. It's a free for organization.
I'm not stopping you because you're promoting your product. I'm stopping you because we're out of time.
Okay.
Thank you so very much, Christina.